Some folks have been asking since they've seen out on the YouTube channel and on the forums and things that I got quite a few versions of the Viragos, and now I've actually added two Suzukis, a little Suzuki and a big Suzuki, and they're kind of wondering what's the difference in the rides on these bikes because they're all a little bit different. So we'll walk over here and kind of show close-ups of each of the bikes. Some of them I built, some of them are restored, and get a feel for what's different about each one. Alright, so for the stock 750, like I say, this is the first gen, great running little bike, but as you can see, when you're sitting on the bike, you're kind of sitting up straight. I got my feet up, so it's kind of like sitting on a stool, like a bar stool or something. But the controls are good, my elbows are just a little bit bent, so I got good control sitting up straight, doesn't hurt my back, you know, no issues out of this bike. And it's pretty nimble because these first gens are skinny, and so you can turn it around really good. So overall, this bike sits good. It's just not as comfortable as the bobber because you're sitting up kind of straight, but you have a lot of control of the bike. You can move it around quite a bit, go forward and backward, and you can enjoy the ride really good. So now let's move on over to the little bitty Suzuki, and let's see what my legs look like on that little Suzuki. Alright, so for the Savage, you can see this is a little 650. I am pretty tall for this little bike. I'm standing up quite a bit higher than this bike, so you can see when I get on it, although, you know, I don't have a lot of weight on me, you can see my legs are just bent up. And so when I'm sitting up on the pegs, I'm way up here. Still pretty comfortable, my back's straight, but my arms are, you know, a little more draggy, a little bit too tall for this bike. But if you were learning bikes, getting used to bikes, this one's really good because it doesn't have a lot of power. It's only got about 30 horsepower, I think. And a single cylinder, it's not going to get away from you. You can stop it real good. It's got really good brakes and everything, but just a little too small for me. If I was just running around doing things, this would be a great little bike to have just to zip around, run up to the corner market. But I like it because it's little and it's a good learner for my boys as they can learn practicing on these bikes. Alright, so on to this big old 1400. Like I say, I got a real pretty paint job. Hope y'all like my paint job because that took me 2 times to do that, to get that purple to match up, because this bike actually has purple on its frame and I had to match everything up versus just a bike with a black frame. You can do whatever you want to for the color. But you can see this is a much bigger bike, quite a bit heavier, probably weighing in about 600 pounds, but it's so big because it's lengthened out that it's really hard to turn this bike. The handlebars are in really tight too. I don't know why these big old mirrors are on here, but the handlebars are really tight, and so you don't have a lot of force you can apply versus handlebars that are out a little bit wider like the Virago. So I like the bike. It's a great looking bike, really pretty, but it's a little too heavy for me. I need to be a little bit bigger guy to ride this 1400, but I like the power. You know, I like everything about the bike. It sounds great, just a little heavy. So probably won't ride this one much because, like I say, I don't get out on the interstates much anymore. This one's going to be a little too hard to kind of get around the curves on the roads that I like to ride. I'll probably stick with the bobber or riding some of these little bit smaller bikes. But it's a great bike, really pretty, and I'm glad to have it to the collection. Plus it restored really well. So nice looking bike. Alright, so on to my favorite, and as you can see I got a camera mounted up on it. I'm going to put a camera on my helmet as well because we're going to take a couple of these for a ride. So I got the camera already on this, and this will be the first one. But for the bobber, you can see that the bobber sits down. And so I got a good sit on this. My feet are out good. It has, if I can keep it on the kickstand. Up here I got forward controls. And so I'm riding like this. So it's a little hard on your back, but not bad enough that if you remember to keep your back straight, you can ride it good. You can also get down if you need to when you're coming into curves. But comfort-wise, I like having my legs out front on these forward controls versus having them down here where it just feels a little less like you're in control. I like this one because you can just kind of lean into everything. So you got to be a little careful. You get in a tight curve, you know, your feet aren't down here where you can push things, but it's really nice for cruising. And for the roads I ride with the curves, I take it easy on them. I'm not a lunatic. And so I have a good time on this bike. So really this one rides better than most any of the bikes so far as just the joy of it. So my favorite right there is the bobber, and it looks pretty good too. So we'll take it for a ride here in a minute and we'll run around. All right, so for the second gen Virago, this is an 1100. but it's not any heavier than the first gens, it's just a lot fatter. And so that adds a little bit of complexity to turning the curves and things because they widened it up, you know, make it a little dressier for this bike. The first gens are real skinny, so you can kind of throw them around. But this one's got good handlebar length, you know, the width is good. I sit good on it. This big old fat seat is plenty to sit on. And when they set it up, they kind of gave you a half forward control. So you're not right under yourself with your feet. You're face forward, but you're not all the way up with forward control. So it does sit pretty good. It's a little tough to get around curves if you get in trouble, I found, because you can't get this bike to lay down as quick as you can a first gen for some reason. I don't know if it's the rake angle's different or just the weight of it. I don't know, but it doesn't want to go around curves near as nimbly as the first gens do. But it's a great cruiser. I mean, this thing is so comfortable riding it. I've taken it down the road, taken it down the interstate. It's so comfortable, you can just sit on this thing all day. So it's a great bike if you're doing long hauls, much better than the first gens because it's really comfortable. The first gens kind of work you a little bit when you're going high speeds, but this one just putts along, big old horsepower. You could pass anybody you want to on this thing with an 1100. So all in all, it's a nice bike. Plus it's really pretty, cleaned up nice for a restore. So this is definitely a keeper for me as well. And finally out of the lineup is this little cafe racer that I made. And like I say, it's really tall. You'll see when I get on it. See, the seat's way up here. So even with my long legs, I have trouble sitting on this bike and backing it up or pushing it forward because I can't get my legs underneath me. So if you line one up on a cafe and you get it this high, you're gonna have trouble. You know, it's pretty cool to ride and everything, but you're gonna have trouble because you just can't get your legs up on the seat. So if I do anything with this bike, I'm gonna lower this seat down a little bit, go ahead and get that tank back down where it's closer to where it's supposed to be. That way I can get my legs down. But if I sit on this bike, this is my biggest problem, is that I'm leaned over like this, like you should be on a cafe, ready to take on the world on this bike, but my feet are way back here. And so all of that weight is resting on my arms and on my back. My back is so crooked. So, considering that I'm older and I'm not in my 20s anymore, this bike is really tough because you can ride it for a while and then your arms start getting tired and you got to take a break and you can't do a long haul on this bike at all. But it handles real well. You know, you got everything down. You can turn corners good and do all that. Maybe if I move these up a little bit, it might be better, you know, on my controls. But I'm just a little too far back and a little too forward. So, like I say, I bet I hadn't put 100 miles on this bike since I built it because it's just not that comfortable. All right, so there is the lineup of the current bikes that are restored and running. And nice set of bikes. Like I say, each one's a little different. Each one's, you know, got its goods and got its bads for me, for my size, for a rider. We'll get set up, take a few of these out, and just see how they do. stock bike, it's a much quieter bike, but we'll see how it rides. It runs pretty good too. Let's get our GoPro turned out. Alright, so up next is the second gen 1100. So we'll take it for the same little trip. And it's a smooth bike. I'm going to have to be a little more careful in the curves than I am for the lighter bikes, but we'll cruise right through there. So up next for the short ride is the 1400 Intruder. Alright, so last on the list is the little Suzuki Savage. Alright, so there's a comparison of the 5 different bikes we got right now, except for the Cafe back there, which I just don't like, so I'm not going to ride it. But as you can see, the bikes all run really good, and the Savage was a little small. You could see it running, didn't quite run as fast as the others. The horsepower is a little lower. For the Intruder, it's actually so big that you saw the back kick out on the video, if you saw it wiggle. when I went around that sharp curve, I just don't have enough body weight to throw that bike around like I need to. So I'm still leaning towards these Viragos here, especially the bobber, because I like it because it rides so smooth. But all three of those run really, really good, and they're about my size and pretty comfortable to ride. So I think we're going to keep those, but we'll probably also keep these Suzukis as well and add them to the collection. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.